Gender Discrimination under the Civil Rights Act by Aubrey Dyer. What is the name and purpose of the controlling law? Employment discrimination law in the United States derives from the common law and is codified in numerous state and federal laws, particularly the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as in the ordinances of counties and municipalities. These laws prohibit discrimination based on certain characteristics or protected categories. The United States Constitution also prohibits discrimination by federal and state governments against their public employees. Discrimination in the private sector is not directly constrained by the Constitution, but has become subject to a growing body of federal and state law. Federal law prohibits discrimination in a number of areas, including recruiting, hiring, job evaluations, promotion policies, training, compensation, and disciplinary action. State laws often extend protection to additional categories or employers. Under federal law, employers generally cannot discriminate against employees on the basis of race, sex, pregnancy, religion, national origin, disability, physical or mental, age for workers over 40, military service or affiliation, bankruptcy or bad debts, genetic information, citizenship status. The proposed U.S. Equality Act of 2015 would ban discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. As of June 2018, 28 U.S. states do not explicitly include sexual orientation, and 29 U.S. states do not include gender identity within anti-discrimination statutes. When was the law enacted, and by what law-making body? The Equality Act is a bill in the United States Congress that, if passed, would amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex in employment, housing, public accommodations, public education, federal funding, credit, and the jury system. It is expected to be introduced in the 116th United States Congress. The original Equality Act was developed by U.S. Representatives Bella Abzug and Ed Koch in 1974. The Equality Act of 1974 sought to amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, and marital status in federally assisted programs. The bill authorized civil actions by the Attorney General of the United States in cases of discrimination on account of sex, sexual orientation, or marital status in public facilities and public education. On June 27, 1974, the bill was referred to the House Committee on the Judiciary, where it died. The Equality Act updates the definitions of three terms: sex to include a sex stereotype, sexual orientation or gender identity, and pregnancy, childbirth, or a related medical condition. Sexual orientation as homosexuality, heterosexuality, or bisexuality. Gender identity as gender-related identity, appearance, mannerisms, or characteristics, regardless of the individual's designed sex at birth. The Equality Act expands the categories of public accommodations to include places or establishments that provide exhibits, recreation, exercise, amusement, gatherings or displays, goods, services, or programs, including a store or shopping center. The Equality Act prohibits establishment from being construed to being limited to a physical facility or place. Does the law have any counterparts at the state or federal level? Certain employment is exempted from the Act, including priests, monks, nuns, rabbis, and ministers of religion, actors and models in the film, television, and fashion industries, special employment training programs aimed at ethnic minorities, ex-offenders, young adults, the long-term unemployed, or people with physical or learning disabilities, employment where there are cultural sensitivities, where safety or operational efficiency could be jeopardized, where national security could be jeopardized. What enforcing body or agency is tasked with enforcing the law? Who enforces the Equality Act depends upon the issue. It is usually down to the individual who has been potentially discriminated against to go to the relevant court, such as an employment tribunal or county court. The court depends on the issue. At the court, it would be the judge that decides whether discrimination has occurred and who would then pass down the relevant judgment. The Equality and Human Rights Commission has some enforcement powers in certain situations under the Equality Act. For example, they would have the ability to investigate public bodies and go to judicial review if necessary However, due to limited resources, an issue would need to fall within our strategic priorities for us to do this. How does the enforcing body or agency ensure an organization is compliant? To comply with the terms of the Equality Act, employers must have policies in place and must adhere to certain practices that aim to prevent accident claims, discrimination, and foster equal opportunities within the organization. All workers and job applicants must be treated equally and be given the same set of opportunities regardless of their age, sex, race, disability, sexual orientation, disability, culture, or anything other personal characteristic that might be discriminated against. As a worker, you have a right to fair practices and behavior in the workplace, fair allocations of workloads, equal access to benefits and conditions, a workplace that is free from unlawful discrimination, harassment, or bullying at work, competitive merit-based selection processes for recruitment and promotion, fair processes to deal with work-related complaints and grievances. If any of these rights are breached or your employment is terminated and you deem it as unfair dismissal, an employment solicitor should be able to offer you their expert opinion. Facts and circumstances and/or recent cases suggesting that controlling laws have been violated. 3 specific cases come to mind here. First, Amy Stevens had worked for nearly 6 years as a funeral director at RG&GR Harris Funeral Homes when she informed the funeral home's owner that she is a transgender woman. Her employer fired her and the EEOC sued on her behalf. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that Amy's employer engaged in unlawful sex discrimination when it fired her because she's transgender. The Supreme Court had been asked to consider whether it is sex discrimination under federal civil rights statutes to fire someone because the person is transgender. After Amy was fired, the ACLU assisted Amy with the filing of a complaint with the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The EEOC sued the funeral home for sex discrimination, and the ACLU has joined the case to ensure Amy's interests are protected as the case moves forward. In March of 2018, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that Amy was unlawfully fired and that federal sex discrimination laws protect transgender people. In the second case, Zarda versus Altitude Express, it was decided on February 26 of 2018, where both the Equal Opportunity Commission and the Department of Justice filed amicus briefs in this case, arguing opposite sides. The final ruling did not focus on the merits of Zarda's case specifically, but whether sexual orientation was protected as a function of sex, and in effect protecting gay workers from discrimination under the Civil Rights Act. Suggestions for employers that will assist an organization in being compliant with the controlling law. Some questions to consider with all employees. Are your training sessions structured in a way that lets everyone get involved? Are the benefits and perks you are offering accessible to all of your employees or just a select few? Do your employees feel comfortable expressing their needs, and do you work together to create solutions that benefit you both? Also, are you letting employees express their ideas, which can create an innovative business solution? And finally, this brings to the reference page at the end of this presentation. And if you are interested in reading up on more about facts of the Equality Act and all that is involved, here are the sites that I used for my presentation. Thank you for your time in viewing this.